Thanks for tuning in to Minds of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Luis Acevedo, and with me today I have Bret Bernhoft. He is a self-taught programmer, and he has been studying transhumanist philosophy for quite some time now, and that's what's going to be pretty much the focal point of this conversation. So, Bret, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me on. This is the kind of entertainment and infotainment that I think the world needs. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. So, Bret, why don't you go a little bit into your background and how, I guess, you went from not knowing how to code to then learning how to code and finding your way into transhumanism through all of that? Because I believe they're connected.
They are indeed connected. When I was, it was right. I'll just be frank with you. It was right after the election of our last president, I'll just say. And I realized that I needed to improve my life. I realized that I needed a skill set that was sellable and hireable. So it was either stocks or coding. And I decided to go with coding because stocks are too volatile, in my opinion, too unpredictable. So I went with coding, and I'm very glad that I did, because I have in that time been able to teach myself up till very recently alone, but now I have a few mentors that I work with. But the education that I gave myself primarily through books was about the history, the current and the future context of technology, and what it took to get us here and where we think we're going as sort of the techno-optimistic crowd, if you will. And when I realized that transhumanism, around this, I should say around the same time I discovered coding as my career path, or my next adventure in my career path, I discovered transhumanism interlocks with that sort of thinking, that sort of, in my opinion, self-improvement very, very closely. And I was able to start studying the history of transhumanism around the same time I started coding. And now I'm not too active, but active enough inside the transhumanist community online. And I participate in various forums and wikis and my own thinking and writing. So,
nice. So,
yeah.
What exactly was it about transhumanism that appealed to you?
That's a fair question. I think it's a mix. It's two sides of one coin. One side is the community and the optimism that I think is generally involved with transhumanists. I think transhumanists are very optimistic about the use of technology. And the other side of that is sort of the exponential self-improvement, in my opinion. It's exponential self-improvement. And learning to code brought my life into the next gear. I was able to get, I'll loop back very shortly to answer that question. I was able to get a great job. I was able to pay for my own healthcare, et cetera, kind of thing. For the first time in my life, I was able to do that. And I had only labor skills prior to that and some marketing skills. But it was after I took the leap and spent 5 years teaching myself to code, because I had to learn how to think in new ways, I could say. And I feel that my mind now is on. Before, it was maybe in sleep mode a little bit, but now I have a very clear thinking mind that was brought on by my coding. And to loop back now to bring this to the answer to your question, the second side of that coin is exponential self-improvement through coding, because now I have these, in my experience, these great agencies. Anyone can have these agencies, by the way. It's not just me or a select few. It's anyone who learns how to program can have these great agencies with computers that were, frankly, for the individual, impossible to do before. For me, they were very impossible to even imagine prior to taking on coding. So transhumanism adopts that, I think, as a primary motivation for seeing the world. How can I assimilate? How can I improve? How can I make myself greater through the use of technology? And that in of itself has many different varieties of use or philosophy. But generally speaking, making myself more exponential through technology is what attracted me to transhumanism.
Right. So I guess let's dig into the details there, because as you just said, there's a bunch of different ways that one could improve themselves through technology. And as we were talking before the show as well, my view of my understanding of transhumanism is a merger with the machines on a physical level, not just on this immaterial level on which we have it. I mean, yes, our phones are material, or the hardware is all material, but the way we interact, it's basically we're putting our consciousness into typing our thoughts and sharing that, taking photos, things of that nature. So, what exactly is it about transhumanism that I know I just asked you appeal to you, but on a more specific level, as far as that exponential growth? What part of technology do you see helping you out, and like how do you want to improve yourself with the use of technology?
That's a great question. If I was to give, I think the most important answer to that question, there are multiple answers to that question I could give you, but I think the most important answers to that question are biofeedback loops and AI, artificial intelligence. The human body emits information in any number of forms. You could calculate, I'm sure, 1,000 different forms of communication of the human body. And if we were able to capture or record or sense with machines any of those given bio emissions, the feedback loop tied to AI could help us very, very quickly improve any habit that we want to, anything that is dual, anything that is changeable or mutable would be changeable via, I think, artificial intelligence and biofeedback. And that includes how we seek entertainment. And that's one of my large missions in life, and this is totally relevant to what we're talking about. One of my large missions in life is to bring about a specific form of video editing done by artificial intelligence in real time or in a fraction of a second that relies on biofeedback loops and user preferences to create or auto-generate information as a response to your self-emitting information. So it's this communication of the human. The machine senses, captures, records, however it does that communication, processes it, and then gives you feedback as you could say an impossibly intelligent external observer. And the human has the option to decide what they want to do with that. And if the human is in alignment with that information, I feel that's unbelievably valuable for so many different areas of life.
Wow, that's very fascinating. So is this something that you're actively working on right now then?
I'm not active. Theoretically, I'm theorizing about it. I read about it personally. I think about it. I dream about it in some ways, but I am not qualified or skilled enough to work with artificial intelligence quite yet. So no, not like a product, but more like talking about it like this. Definitely.
Gotcha. Nice. Well, that's very intriguing, and I hope that it can actually materialize into something. I think that it seems like a good idea. Now, I know that, as you mentioned earlier, you had this kind of awakening as you started to learn how to code. Um, and from what I know about you, I would be inclined to believe that in a way that was spiritual too. Now, where do you see spirituality and transhumanism connecting? Because oftentimes, when you hear about merging with technology, the first thought process or the first thing to do is to say you're dehumanizing. You're taking away humanity. You're going against nature. But obviously, you're just doing away with spirituality, and it's more. I feel that atheists are more inclined to a transhumanist philosophy. So, how do you reconcile the two?
That's a great question. That's actually very important to me and something I've given considerable thought and study and research, and I continue to do that because it's a very quintessential emerging intersection, technology and spirituality. That is going to be a mega personal and collective phenomena in the very near future, in my opinion. And to that said, I don't want to define anyone else's spirituality for them. That's not my goal. But to answer your question, how do I reconcile spirituality and transhumanism? is how I view the next generation of technologies to be. And they're the first word that comes to mind is ethereal or transient, but they're not. I don't believe they're made out of hardware so much as they're made out of energy and some intelligent patterns that will structure and provide function. And that kind of sounds, it's like when we went from wired internet to Wi-Fi internet. It was that you're more portable, you have more agency with not necessarily, but you more than likely have more agency with a Wi-Fi computer. You can move around with it. You can take it to someone else's house, for instance, and use it there if they have Wi-Fi. But I think it's this next generation of the manifestation of technology, and it's to conceptualize that. It's to think about moving into away from physicality and into the abstraction of that device. And it's, with that said, I think that's very close to what spirituality is. And when I think about the combination of the two, it's that kind of thinking that helps me start to think about it in a generalized concept. Now, when I get more specific about my spirituality and technology, this abstraction, this energy, this energetic manifestation of technology, such as the data flow in the internet tubes, if you will, that's sort of a abstraction of technology. I personally feel that there is a lot of value in how do I say this? I believe there's a lot of value in magic, in the use of abstract and occult principles to create change and conformity with one's will. That's kind of a general definition of magic. And I put a lot of value in my studies and what works and what's reconcilable and what I can feel good about doing at the end of the day. And that level of thinking ties into that intersection of magic and technology. And when I put that magic into it, when I put that kind of, frankly, occult spiritual thinking into it, I start to animate what I'm doing. It animates automatically, not because it's woo-woo, but because I have sort of a trained will that teaches me how to move energy inside of any system. So I hope that answers your question, but there's I could write a book on that. Maybe I will, but to answer your question, it's just the next realization we're going to have of technology is going to be unphysical. And when we adopt that realization and we see what spirituality can provide the thinker, the technology user, I think it'll be a very common relationship to use magic to think about crafting reality with technology, finding what works especially well, what doesn't work especially well, and maturing those disciplines.
Yeah, I actually resonate a lot with what you're saying, because when I think about, for instance, the blockchain, the way I can kind of make an analogy there or a parallel is with humanity. Like you can just look at your own family line, like you are a block in a chain of a bunch of data that some people can call like the Ashkenazi records, the book of life, these things. And, you can say you're time stamped in a way, right? Because you got a beginning and an end. And so you're passing on your genes to your offspring. And then I also think of like NFTs, like as being, and then it's like being a human, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with NFTs, but the non-fungible tokens, like they're unique. They have unique characteristics. And depending on what you're willing to pay or give, whatever you want for this analogy, however you're going to transact with another person, will depend on how much you actually receive from that person, as far as like how much they open up to you. How like, you have a deeper relationship with your family than you would me. You would tell your family certain things that you wouldn't tell me certain things, because, or even closer friends, because you've built up that relationship, however that may be. There was transactions that are taking place to foster a sense of trust and openness. And so I definitely resonate exactly with what you're saying there. I even think that, the internet in some way is a representation of the spiritual realm, like we're bringing these, as you said, these abstract way of thinking into the material in a way. So, I can definitely see exactly where you're going with that. Now, I do want to touch on why it is, because as we were talking earlier as well, I came across one of your posts on the philosophy forum regarding panpsychism. And in that post, you said that technology is sacred. And in a way, we've kind of touched on that. But I want to go a little more direct as to why you actually believe technology is sacred.
That's a great question. Excuse me. The core essence, the technology is sacred because of where it comes from and what it brings into the world, who it communicates with and what it does. As I've understood technology to be, they are quote unquote nothing but neutral tools. The use of a tool is defined, in my opinion, by the user. It's either positive or negative in some senses by the user themselves, and that's a general philosophy I think a lot of people could appreciate. But I think technology is sacred because of how, as I've said, as you've asked, and I've replied before in this conversation, the exponential growth factor is one of the reasons why I love transhumanism or embrace transhumanism, because of how much I've benefited from those kinds of pursuits. And I feel that technology is sacred because it comes from humanity. And I'm a humanist, I guess, at my core. And I think humanity is just fine as we are, if you will. We don't need to change. We don't have to change, and we're great. We're sacred too, and technology comes from us, but there is an option to change with our tools. And I've benefited so deeply from it that I'm surprised by how much I've changed and benefited from these tools, that I find that their use is sacred because of how much wellness they bring into my life. And I think that is true for a lot of people. Technology extends in any way that you want it to, who you are and what you do. And if it brings you evil and if it brings you bad and discomfort, I guess we'll say, then I could see why you would presume technology is evil or unsacred or of something unholy or unsacred, if we'll just say it that way. But I think if the user is open and willing to adopt and adapt, and that's their core motivation, technology immediately becomes, I don't want to say salvation, because it's definitely not that, but it becomes very quickly a tool for self-transfiguration and its transmutation. That's, I think, what I'm trying to get at is, if we've ever had the opportunity to manifest the philosopher's stone that the alchemist has sought for so many millennia or for so many centuries, then this is today, in my opinion. And it's just getting started as to what can be done and what's possible. So to me, the alchemical, the hermetic, the Gnostic sort of pursuits of personal transformation from within are magnified so many times more by these structures that I have around me, that you have around you. And that to me is very sacred. That by itself is just, there are other things that I find to be sacred. The natural world is beyond, it is the sacred, in my opinion, the natural world. Or you could say anything that you want to is sacred. But I find that the reason why technology is sacred, to answer your question very simply, is because it brings about so much opportunity for exponential growth and transmutation. And I don't see very many things in our world that do that these days, besides what we humans are giving ourselves. And there's a lot to be said there, but that's really the answer.
Right. Yeah, no. And I would even go as far as to say that belief is a form of technology. It's something, it's a tool that we use in order to operate in the world, but that leads me to my next question, which is, I'm sure you seem very educated in a lot of the spiritual traditions. And so I'm sure you're aware that these spiritual traditions, such as Christianity, they have historical, whether you think they're fictional or not, characters that lived, hundreds and hundreds of years, some almost reaching 1,000 years. And from my understanding, one of the biggest things for transhumanism isn't so much to make humans immortal, but to more so extend life and to cure aging. That's my basic understanding. Now, uh, how do you, once again, I guess, going a little bit deeper into that reconciliation of spirituality and this technology, what do you think about these, whether you think they're fictional or not, these characters who allegedly lived hundreds of years without presumably the modern technology we have today?
That's a great question. Some would say that technology automatically causes the degradation of the human, automatically causes, what's the word I'm looking for? When something wears down from lack of use because it's being supplemented by something. That's kind of a common old story, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's true, let's just assume I'm wrong about everything, and that the characters that you're, or the people that you're referring to who lived hundreds, 1,000 years, did accomplish that without any modern technology. That is a demonstration of greater ability than achieving the same thing with technology. And that would be my first step, is to do it without technology. If it was possible for me to turn on a gene through meditation in my body or something of that equivalent, I would absolutely do that. And if I could live 1,000 years with that, I would prefer that over technology, because that would be, in other contexts, I'll use the word organic is my preference. But when I can't do that, I need to turn to something that I know I have the replicated agency with. And if the technology is available and the natural ability is, or the innate natural ability is inconceivable to me at that time, which makes it impossible for me, I will turn to the tech. But if the tech can be replaced with a walk in the forest, I would rather take the walk in the forest.
Fair enough. I don't see anything wrong with that. Using technology as sort of, it's a tool, as you've already said, it's assisting you through life. So yeah, I completely understand that. Now, in what way do you think that, at the risk of sort of repeating myself here, in what ways do you think transhumanism is valuable to the average person? Because despite the fact that it's becoming more popular and more heard of, it's still very nascent to the masses. Like, it's still a very new idea, despite it going all the way back to Julius Huxley. Most people aren't aware of it, and they don't know, or they're afraid to even entertain the thought, whether it be because of traditional values or just simply ignorance, because I think ignorance has a lot to do with our fears. So how do you think transhumanism could actually improve somebody's life and add value to it? That
That's a
philosophy.
that's a very important question. Um, I that's a really important question, and there are two avenues my mind wants to go down.
Explore both.
All right. I think the first one is an experience I'm familiar with, and that is when I raised myself out of quite literal ignorance, quite specifically ignorant. I was very, very ignorant about the world and what I could do in myself. And this coding journey has been transformative because I've unlocked confidence in myself to be able to know that if I don't know something, which I don't know most things, as anyone does, I am able to teach myself anything because I have that experience and that confidence now. And I think that first track is something that the average person could seriously benefit from, is just the realizing that exponential growth and change is possible, and that you don't have to adopt necessarily technology, but the transhumanist philosophy at its core is about, I believe, self-improvement. And when you lock on to that transhumanist notion and you see that there are tools around you to just expedite the process, not degrade or devalue the process necessarily. Some approaches and some tools would move you too quickly. You wouldn't integrate all the information. But with the right tools and approach, that radical self-improvement, that exponential self-growth is what transhumanism is all about. And I think that's a first benefit to the average person. And the second one is, or are, the collateral experiences that come from the transhumanist technologies in other people's lives. So the internet is, I think, now I guess the internet's a poor example. It's not really a secondary technology in almost anyone's life, but um, let's just say 5G. Let's say 5G is a good thing just for the conversation.
Mhm.
It's not, yeah, it's a good thing for the conversation. And the early adopter or any technology, the early adopters will bring that technology into the world. And it's not so much to make it cheaper and it's not so much to make it more available, but it's the improvements and the increasing ease of their lives open up all new channels of resources or new channels of resources in society and other people's lives as a result. So it makes life easier for other people when other people aren't struggling or suffering as much. So I think the average person could benefit from transhumanism through, if by choice, a raising out of some sort of ignorance. They don't have to be ignorant about anything in particular, and collateral experiences of, I guess, social easing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yep. I completely get where you're going with that. Now, I want to touch on a little more of the, I guess, the negative aspect of the technology itself. And as you, I'm kind of inferring here, but it seems to me that you're very aware of the controversy behind 5G in particular. Just, I'm assuming, just, I think I picked up on it. So, um, what are your thoughts on that? We'll dive down the whole 5G route first. I know that we can go many areas with that, but a lot of people are concerned whether it be health, that it's damaging their body, and I'm not claiming either way. I don't know enough on the topic specifically. I just know that there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of information that contradicts each other as to whether or not it's going to do more good or harm. So, where do you stand on that in particular?
That's another important question, because I'm speaking from one side of a coin, like we used as an analogy already. Techno optimism is one side of that coin. Techno pessimism, I guess you could say, is the opposite of that coin. And to weigh the coin properly, both sides of that coin need to be fit. So I think you could say the quote unquote Luddite, the quote unquote anti technology, and that's not. I'm not using Luddite as a slur or a malevolent term. I'm just saying that those who don't even want to learn how to use technology, those arguments are very important to strengthening the overall solution or outcome of where humanity is going. If those arguments don't exist, frankly, we would have cancer if we didn't have an anti-transhumanist movement. Transhumanism would not be strong at all. It would not learn from its weaknesses, it as in the movement or as in the philosophy or the people involved. And there would be too quick of a gain of power. And from that would be too rash of decisions made. So I think transhumanists are wise to pay attention to, for a number of reasons, to pay attention to those who do not agree with them, because ultimately if the goal here is not political power, if the goal is the wellness of our species, and I think that is for most people the goal, and the individual for that matter, then we need both sides of that dialogue. Otherwise, we won't get it, no matter what happens.
So let's go into a little bit more about the privacy issues. So, or not even privacy. Let's hold on that for a second, because something that's more, I think, in relation to transhumanism is the concern with gene manipulation and essentially eugenics. And if we go a little bit further with that way of thinking, some people have even criticized the transhumanist movement into wanting to create a zoo essentially for humans. So, or the humans being, the animals in the zoo, if you will. So, what are your thoughts on that?
This is where the anti-transhumanism movement must be strong. This is where anti-transhumanism must attack transhumanism, quite frankly, so that it doesn't happen. Because yes, there are eugenic threads within transhumanism. It's undeniable. The technology itself could be used for horrible, horrible things. At the same time, the technology could be used for very positive things. Mm-hmm. So this is where the anti-transhumanists should tear apart transhumanism and make sure that any signs of eugenics are brought to the light and reduced to null at best, at least reduced to null, so that we don't have that. I have no support for eugenics, especially social eugenics that are mandatory in any possible way, especially with technology, because the
Which
change.
yeah, sorry. I was going to say the social. I think I get where you're going with this, because this is going to be on YouTube. Don't want to get any strikes, but the social eugenics as well, the mandates, etc. That's also been a concern of mine. Not so much right now, but with a transhumanist movement, rising, in almost social pressure being applied to kind of, in a way, coerce people into doing procedures and therapies that they might not otherwise do. That's something that I'm very concerned with the movement, because it seems when anything gets power, it doesn't matter how good you are. We can go all the way back to what I was saying with Christianity. The Christians had a not so good time long ago. You can demonize them all you want for what they've done. So it's not just whether they're holy people or religious. This happens with anything, any movement that gets actual power, as it eventually becomes manipulated and abused. So yeah, if you can take it over from there, pretty much. I just wanted to interject that.
Totally, and I apologize if I was going down a route that you can't have on your channel.
No. I'm totally cool with talking about everything. Just have to be tactful about it. Yeah. I think you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
Totally, and I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate you jumping in. So that said, how do I feel about? I mean, mandatory. How do I say this? I need to take into mindful consideration where we are right now. What we're talking about is unacceptable in my opinion.
Right.
That's what I'll say. It's unacceptable, and a lot of transhumanists feel that way. But a lot of transhumanists have mixed opinions about that, and some support it in some very strange ways, I'll say. Definitely don't need to say anyone's name. Definitely don't need to do that. But just to say, it's that there are some folks who are very excited without the egalitarian or the utilitarian or the empathy necessary to operate these tools. And this is where spirituality kind of, in my opinion, comes into play. Empathy is gratitude and empathy are very wonderful things. They can really reduce a lot of malevolence and a lot of selfishness. So if you're grateful and you have empathy for the world, I think that just opens you up to reducing your errors in general. But the anti-transhumanists need to drive that home if the transhumanists don't. That would be my response to that, to the anti-transhumanist crowd. If you don't feel there's empathy coming from transhumanism, or if you feel that there is a path towards something quite disturbing, my response to you would be, your responsibility is to speak up. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I really like what you're saying, because I don't often hear somebody bringing a level-headed perspective when it comes to topics like this. It's either they're all in or it's nothing. So I like that. And I like that you're acknowledging that there is, that the whatever it may be, whatever actually serves a purpose in keeping things in check. Because without any sort of pushback, things can go too far. So basically what you're saying is they can help things keep in check. Like they have a purpose, and it is to keep things in check. So sure. I really do appreciate that perspective, and you seem to have a really unique perspective on this, because usually, like I said, it's either one or the other. So
thank you, I appreciate that. My word, the one word I would interject into any conversation about what we should do with anything, in my opinion, is mindfulness. If you're mindful, you're considering all the options, and you're doing so in the present moment. And that's not a spiritual statement. That's just that I learned about mindfulness in psychology, in my own experiences and studies of psychology. It's an agnostic, almost atheistic approach to thinking, if you will. Mm-hmm. Regardless, mindfulness or self-awareness, or the willingness to consider, maybe that's a better way to put it, just the willingness to consider. Because if you're not willing to consider, you're wrong. Then you probably are.
So yourself, are you attracted to the idea of uploading your consciousness and maybe um, altering your genes or merging with a machine in some way to improve your life?
That's a fundamental question. Um, no, yes, and no. And I'll tell you where yes and where no. No, I don't want to edit my genes. I don't want my body to be edited. I think my body's fine the way it is. But yes, I want to extend my consciousness like a magnet, not remove my consciousness from my body, but to extend it like a broadcast or a magnet into a machine to experience that extension. I don't want to lose my person. And I don't think I have to. And if I do have to, then there was a compromise that wasn't made because the individual, humanity. I'll just say again that humanity is important and humanity is sacred. Humanity is great. All of humanity is important, and we shouldn't have to sacrifice our core existence for something new. And I don't think we have to. I don't think there is that. I think we can. I would get if Elon Musk's Neuralink chip, which is a piece of physical hardware, was made available and shown to work, I would have that implanted in my body, but I would not edit or manipulate. I would not, frankly, mutilate my body, in my opinion, for something different like that. I would put it in the back of my brain or underneath my brain itself. I think it goes underneath the brain, but um, I don't have an interest in fundamentally radically transforming my very physiology. It would be more like borrowing the physiology of a robot and then unplugging and then walking away.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, another way that I've heard some of this technology be explained is not so much as enhancing the human experience, but rather restoring the human body to its normal function. For example, I've once been told that my glasses are a form of transhumanism. And I initially was like, okay, I can kind of see that. The technology is improving my life. But upon further reflection, they're not. They're just restoring normal function. My eyesight is as it should be with my glasses, are damn near close to where it should be. So I think that that's another thing that gets kind of, I guess, confused with, this idea of enhancing isn't necessarily true in most cases from what I'm seeing. In my opinion, I think it's a big marketing push to claim the enhancement side of things when really it's just restoring. You have any reflections on that?
Definitely. That is a really important phase for new technology is restorative function, medicine or therapy or um, I'll be candid and say that I need surgery on my left shoulder, and it was from an accident. And when I get that surgery, when I can afford that surgery and get that surgery, it might involve implanted pieces of metal, and that's sort of a transhumanist. It's sort of a restorative. It would be a restorative transhumanist surgery. So that's a very very important point, and that is where I think most transhumanist technologies will enter into society is with the restorative rejuvenation of just what you'd expect a normal or average experience for the individual who is being considered to have.
So just so I understand correctly, basically what you're saying is that the fundamental stages, it's restorative, but eventually it will be to enhance.
There will eventually, yes, it will eventually be to enhance. That depends on the individual and the society and the global circumstances. There is a lot of variables to consider when deciding whether or not to embrace or whether or not to even think that it's possible that it will happen, the enhancement, because there are some big things we have to go through or barriers and challenges we have to get across, such as the underlying, frankly, the underlying, you could call it ethics or issue of this very question, which is there's restorative medicine. That's wonderful. But some would ask, should we even be able to enhance? Should we be able to? And that's a question for the future, I think, because right now so much medicine needs to be invented. If it stays at medicine, then frankly, that's just fine, because that would mean that we've reclaimed so much of the normalcy of humanity for so many millions, hundreds of millions, possibly, of people, just through simple technology. But if it does go to enhancement, that's an evolution of the conversation, I feel.
Yeah, for sure. Like one of the things I think about when we talk about enhancement is how that can be abused. Now, I want to preface with this: all technology, when it's first coming out, is pretty much exclusive to people who can afford it, and that's usually the wealthy. And then as time goes on, the product is able to be mass produced at scale for more people. It becomes cheaper, and just like the cell phone, an example I like to use is like Lyndon B. Johnson. He had a phone in his car before the phone in his car. I mean, before phones were even in cars. So, but one thing I think about when we're talking about enhancements is that they can be used to, and I know you said this is a future conversation, and I totally understand where you're coming from with that. But they can be used to create, like super athletes. So then not only can you like you can envision a future of caste systems based on somebody's genetic makeup and how their parents were able to afford or whatever that may be, but on just like a micro scale of that, you can see the detriment to the human not having a choice in becoming something because they're now becoming manufactured to become a particular thing. We already kind of see that when you look at somebody like a Michael Jackson, right? Somebody who is like beaten into success. So that was just on a totally like epigenetic level, like not really in there as the transhumanist movement, I feel, could go to that. So I don't know if you have any reflections on that.
Definitely. That's you can look at any caste system and kind of not any caste system. I would say maybe most caste systems, and see what you're implying is the stratification of access, stratification of agency. Is I use the word agency a lot because I feel that's what technology is all about, is giving or providing extended access and agency ability to the individual or collective. But if what you're saying comes to pass, and that these technologies are unavailable to the average person, because not everyone in the world yet is connected to the internet, so there is a caste system already, and the people who aren't connected aren't participating, and at least not directly, and that is a very real disadvantage. So I can see what you're saying. And I think if I was to be honest and sincere in my expectations of reality, and I was to share what I think is going to actually happen, it will likely be intense stratification. To be honest with you, it's just it's unfortunate, and it's all you look at what brings people apart today, or what distinguishes people just by circumstance today, and you see. I don't want to use a vulgar word, but I'll just say you see great disparity. You see large differences in how people live their lives based on agency, access, tools, and whatnot. You multiply that with superhuman impact, and you might actually have immortal characters that turn into sort of semi-deities of society that do actually live forever. That is a likely outcome, to be frank. And that's not why I pursue technology. That's not why I pursue transhumanism, but it is a likely outcome for our society, unless there is that strong pushback from anti-transhumanism. But even still, the question that I think is really being discussed is, can you put technology back in the bag, or back in the bottle, in a sense? Can we reverse course or control it? Can we stop innovation? Can we slow down progress and make sure that it's equitable? I honestly don't think we can stop progress altogether. I don't think we can stop the introduction of new technologies, and whether it's temporary or permanent, I don't think we can ultimately stop to some degree, social stratification based on quote unquote enhancement.
Yeah, and I think that especially in the times we're living in right now, I think like the on a societal level, on a governmental level, at least a lot of the Western world is in a precarious state. You know, I personally am a believer in that America will be balkanizing in my lifetime, in my very soon lifetime. I would say probably in a decade or so, I could see states starting to secede and things of that nature. However, I'm very optimistic on the outcome of that because I am also, this is something I've been talking about for a long time now. City states, I think city states are where it's at, and I think that you're going to begin to see that um, uh, they're going to begin to populate all over the place. One example I have of this, I'll just say generally before I get to that one specific example, are smart cities. I think smart cities are going to take over and be their own government. Like I know that the United States has your local government, your state government. We have this, you know, beautiful system where we have our checks and balances, but like any system, it deteriorates over time, becomes corrupted. And I think that we're sort of at the end times of the way things used to run for America. So I'm not like an apocalyptic guy. I'm not going out there saying, you know, prepare for war. But I do think that there's a shift in the way things will be running soon. So the one specific example I was going to give is in Nevada, there's this company called Blockchain LLC. I believe it's called Blockchain LLC. And they are working on developing a city, a smart city, where they will be in total control. So it's going to be in an unincorporated county. I'm not sure if you understand I mean no offense by this, but the implications of an unincorporated or you know what it means. Like so, essentially, if you get an unincorporated territory, like you get an unincorporated county, get enough land there, you can build it up to become incorporated, which just means that you can start your own little local government and begin to collect taxes, things of that nature. So essentially, they are going to be. It's still in the works, but it's. I know because I spoke with the chairman of the Transhumanist Party actually, and he is in. I think he lives in Nevada. Gennady Strolovov II, and he said that it's still in the works because he stays up to date on that but it seems to be going forward. And so I tend to think that that's going to be how the future plays out a lot for these, even the transhumanist movement, as we were talking earlier as well. Like, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do see a future where you will have the option to be in a city or your little city state that encourages it or doesn't care for it. If you're following what I'm saying there, sort of like you can go to like my wife and I, my entire family actually, we've never been mask wearers pretty much the entire time, and it's been a heal. That's I understand that there has to be a line in the sand, and if you don't have that line in the sand, things are just going to keep going. As you're saying, the anti-movement. You need to have the anti-movement. I wouldn't consider myself an anti-masker. I just don't wear them. You wear them if you want to, but as soon as you try to force me to do something, I'm not going to do it. And so there was a lot of difficulty, last year. I actually got fired from my job because of it, because I told them, hey, I have medical exemption, also my religious beliefs. And the vice president of the company at the time told me over the phone, you have to change your belief in order to keep working here, which is illegal as hell. And so, needless to say, I was like, I'm not changing my belief. So I'm going on this long, diatribe here just to basically say, I see a future, and I want to get your reflections on this, where while we're fragmented, it's going to be to the beneficial of the individual. So you'll be able to live in a place where you feel you belong. So that's why I'm not necessarily a lot of people who share a lot of my similar views are more pessimistic than me, but I tend to be more optimistic about the future, probably because I have two daughters to think about, right? And I want to have more kids. I want my grandkids to do well. Except, I want my wife and I to do well, my family, and all this stuff. So I try to remain optimistic. So anyway, do you have any reflections on the fragmentation of humanity in a way actually benefiting?
That's an interesting question. Have you ever played the game? This is directly in alignment with your question.
Yeah.
Have you played the game Cyberpunk 2077?
I have not, but I've watched gameplay on it and I'm familiar with it.
All right. Well, I believe that the cyberpunk city, Night City, is a city state within a collapsed United States, and they have a new currency. They have their own government. They have their own army, and it's, in this case run by corporations, regardless of who operates it. I think it's if I'm accurate, it's exactly what you're talking about in terms of the future of our species or our current United States. Do I think that would benefit people if it was done properly? That would be frankly a paradise. I would almost say a utopia, near utopia.
Right.
If it's not done right, it could fail very quickly. But if each city state was given integrity to exist, like maybe Greece or Rome might have been at one point, I think you could have a real outcome that would, especially if transportation was open between city states,
Right.
or between certain city states, you would have the opportunity to go where you're treated best, or go where is best for you and your family to be, and experience what you want to experience. So I think I think people are thinking very much in line with that right now. If I'm accurate, there's a very, very popular video game pushing that idea. So it would benefit people if
I didn't know that. That's news to me. Like I said, I've watched gameplay and stuff, but I knew nothing about the storyline or any of the like deep details. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is that you would bring that up, and that this game would, anyone who, yeah, it's interesting how things correlate in conversation and in society. Ideas percolate in different minds at the same time, kind of thing. So
Right.
very interesting.
Right. So how do you see the future heading? I mean, obviously you're a forward thinker. You're in line with the transhumanist philosophy, and that's as forward thinking as you can get pretty much right now.
I am, at 5 years ago, let me say 6 or 7 years ago, I had a feeling someone like our last president would have come to power, and they did. So I had a one of those insights from my research, like we talked about prior to the video.
Yeah.
But today, I am very uncertain as to what the future looks like. So I am banking on skills that will get me in any condition. And so my response to that is, I think my future is being as flexible as I can, so that I can adapt to whatever comes my way, kind of thing. And you could say that's transhumanist, or that's you could call that anything, but I think the future is uncertain because for me, it's uncertain.
Yep. No, and I couldn't agree with you more on that. I'm I've been called headstrong because when I think I'm right on something, I tend to stick to my guns on it until I'm like really proven otherwise. So just because I'm super confident in my answer, don't think I'm uncertain. I'm just that's my belief that that's where we're heading. I could be wrong because nobody really knows, and I do agree with you that it's completely uncertain. Now, one of the things that really fascinates me, and I would like to hear your thoughts on this, are cryptocurrencies. I think that they already play a huge role in the world right now. Still, a lot of people are, I think, I would just say, afraid because of, as you were saying earlier, the reasons you didn't get into stocks is because of the volatility. I think a lot of people want to have something that's a little more consistent. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think of cryptocurrencies and how they'll play a role in the future. Yeah.
All right. That's a great question. Very relevant. That's a very important question. China, for instance, as you know, you probably know they just banned cryptocurrency transactions.
Well, they try to. I mean,
Yeah.
I always tell everybody it's impossible to do, but anyway, they can try.
Right. Officially, it's banned, right?
Yeah. Right.
Not necessarily practically, but I've come across conversations that say, or that express very high level official interest in auditing the entire blockchain at all times. And if they can't get that, then there's going to be some repercussions from a legislative perspective, such as something similar to China's response. But in our case, it might be how do I say this, more aggressively enforced, perhaps. I don't know what the future of blockchain is, and to say I knew the future of Bitcoin would be a great exaggeration. But my opinion on blockchain, that all said, the possible reality of response from authority in the United States to blockchain aside, I feel blockchain is wonderful. I don't know enough about it to invest my money in it yet, but I do understand that there's a lot of new technologies being based on blockchain. I do understand that there's a lot of economic interest in Bitcoin in particular. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent in consolidating Bitcoins across the blockchain. I think it's like most Bitcoins are owned by less than 1,000 wallets, I thought I heard. So there's a lot of,
Yeah, it's like it's a little over 2,000, I believe.
right. So to the point, I'm glad there's some efficacy or some truth to the rumors I'm hearing, but uh, it's very important that people who invest in themselves, whether it's money or knowledge in Bitcoin, do so with the integrity of following through. Because if Bitcoin or blockchain is to exist, it's going to need to struggle for its survival. I keep saying that about, not necessarily in this conversation, but in other conversations. Very important technologies and movements over the next 10 years will need to struggle for their survival. And if they're worth keeping around, they will survive. Absolutely, because enough people will manifest that outcome. That's what it depends on. Absolutely. And if it's not worthy of survival, it will fade. Like anything, it'll be forgotten. But
Right.
that's, now, if I was to give a semi-educated prediction about the future of blockchain, I would say it's going to have in the mainstream a very particular role, and in the quote unquote underground, it's going to be a form of bread and butter. It's going to be a form of obviously currency, obviously. So the distinction, and it's almost like a stratification in reverse, where
Right.
where the mainstream doesn't adopt, the underground almost entirely embraces, and it flips it. So it's fascinating, and I think it's to just cut to the chase. Very important stuff, must be protected if it's going to be to survive. Might have some very harsh response from global wide authorities. That might not matter, as you pointed out. So it will need to prove itself amongst the people if it's
Right.
just.
There's this very interesting fact that I was oblivious to until I spoke. Well, actually, I think I heard it in one of his other interviews on New Thinking Aloud. His name is James Tunney. I've had the privilege of speaking with him twice. He's a barrister, painter, author, very intelligent dude, very well spoken and knowledgeable. And he said that Isaac Newton was the head of some minting for some nation. So, like silver, gold minting, that kind of stuff, like their currency. And he wanted to outlaw another form of currency. And the punishment, he went so far to enforce this banning of it to the point where you would be dead, you would get killed if you were caught. And I don't remember exactly what the other currency was that they were battling with, but James Tunney, brought this up to basically say he wouldn't be surprised if uh, we got to some point like that where you could be persecuted almost with your life, if you're caught with these currencies, which maybe in the most dystopian future. But even with that, I tend to think that this is also why I'm very convinced city states are going to be the future, is because cryptocurrencies allow you to become your own Federal Reserve, essentially. Why do you need a central bank when you can create a cryptocurrency, build an audience, build a community, which is the most important thing? Forget about fundamentals. I know that on a logical reason, like analytical, like all of that, of course, fundamentals like how it works, the tokenomics, etc. Like all of that stuff is obviously super important. But as we see with things like Dogecoin, the technology's crap. You can also look at, I'll call it out here, Cardano. Nobody's really building on Cardano's blockchain, but there's been a lot of a lot of hype behind it. So a lot of crypto is hype in the community. So basically, what I'm getting at here is these city states, they would have the ability to come up with their own forms of currency. And as we see now, with the fiat, it would just be an evolution of fiat currency. And what I mean by that is it's all belief. Like there's nothing actually giving the United States dollar any power. You can say guns, you can say the government, but even more fundamental than that, people miss this, I think, and this is very important. More fundamental than that is your belief that the government is going to back that dollar and they're whatever it is, but you just believe in the government enough that the dollar is valuable. And so logically, what's the difference between a group of people breaking off, forming their own city and believing Dogecoin to be their currency and it has real value and utility in their life? So, that's another reason why I'm very confident that these city states will arise. And I don't think that cryptocurrencies, a lot of them are centralized. That's another thing that nobody really talks about. There's a lot of marketing of decentralization there, but Bitcoin, about 2,000 people own the majority of it. And we don't even know, I can't even say 2,000 people because you can own multiple wallets. So it's just 2,000 wallets. So nobody really knows the exact number of people that own the lion's share of Bitcoin. And then also you have the mining. But anyway, I don't know if you have any reflections or if you want to piggyback off of anything I said there.
You made a number of points. Let me think. Sovereignty is perhaps the word we're looking at. I think that's dicey because that can be used in any number of ways, in any number of fashions, and it can be waged against when it's identified in someone else. It's like, well, I'm sovereign over this. That's why I say it's dicey. But I believe when it comes to this kind of stuff, this future that we're entering, these transhumanist technologies, possibly city-state politics kind of thing, the disintegration of what we call the union, if you will, I would love, and I frankly pray that there is going to be compromise, that there is going to be agreements made with each other that both parties work out on, because that would almost guarantee these technologies survive and thrive. They won't be in isolation necessarily. They would be doing the thing that technology does in an information environment, which is input, output, and evolve, right? That's my ideal. And that's what I really genuinely hope for. And that's what I strive for when it comes to the larger picture, as I think you would as well, and in your own ways. It's just something to really make a movement towards, to put your energy into. I think I really hope that happens. I really hope it happens, that the future is mutual.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that it's actually going to be more natural, because I think that nations are too big, in my opinion. I think that humans are more comfortable in tribes. I think the whole demonization of tribalism is a big psyop. Yes, there's a negative side to tribalism where you can say, oh, I root for Trump, or oh, I root for Biden. And if you root for whoever I go against, I hate you. That's obviously a low form of tribalism. But a good form of tribalism, for example, I'll take my family. I'm obviously going to choose my family's safety and their life over anybody else. And I'm talking like my immediate family, like my wife, my kids. I'm going to choose them over everybody else. That's a form of tribalism. And I think this is just natural, and this is something that we've become manipulated to be adverse to, in my opinion. And I think that it has a lot to do, this is also my opinion, and I would like to hear if you have a rebuttal, because of the foundation being laid of a transhumanist future and a singularity that is been talked about. I know you're a lot about at least the thought leaders in the singularity movement, and who think that we're heading that way. I think that a lot of that movement is to demonize what actually a tribe is, to then bring about this collective hive mind. And that's even a way of singularity. I know there's 4 different ways that people have hypothesized we can reach the singularity, and one of them being we all connect to a global brain, and then we just work together like an ant colony, essentially, to improve. So I don't know if you have a rebuttal to that, any reflections on that.
It's funny. Well, no, it's very specific. I mentioned that I was on another program on Saturday, and this very topic came up. And my response is the same here as it was there. If it's not voluntary, if it's not something you consent to as really in the sense of the word, an adult as a person, it's not, in my opinion, good. You're being coerced into something that is beyond your choice, and that's against free will, and that's a very important violation. I'm not against the hive mind of groups, but if it's forced upon the individual, obviously that's beyond the pale. And that would be slavery, in my opinion. That would be slavery. If you're not given the choice. It's about, I mean, ultimately it's about liberty is agency, and agency is liberty. If you don't have just the fundamental ability to say yes or no to something, it's not liberty. Ultimately, in my opinion. I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get exactly where you're going with that. Now, I want to circle back to what you were saying earlier in regards to skills and how you just wanted to develop skills because there's uncertainty in the world, but if you develop, important skills, you can at least find some certainty and potentially consistency in either growth or whatever that may be. You'll just find something in which you feel comfortable in, and in the times that we are currently living through. So, what skills? And by the way, I completely agree with that. I'm a big, I'm a big promoter of of people starting their own homesteads. That's like a goal of my family. Is so we want to be as self sufficient as possible. We'd like to have some chickens, some goats, maybe grow a little fruit trees here and there. And I'm a big proponent of that. I encourage people to become more self sufficient. But so I get the skills thing. I think that's going to be extremely valuable. So, what skills do you think are going to be most valuable in these uncertain times?
That's a great question. And let's assume for a second the internet persists. If the internet continues, digital literacy at any level is probably the most fundamental skill. I've been volunteering with various nonprofits on this website. I don't even need to mention the website. I'll just say I've been.
Go ahead. I don't care.
I'm only affiliated as a volunteer, and it's catchafire.org, and it's basically a volunteer and organization pairing platform. You apply to a volunteer position for remote work, and they approve or deny you. And I've been working with these nonprofits on that platform, and it seems there's been a huge rise in digital literacy teaching nonprofits. The nonprofits that want to get online and become official, that are teaching their local communities and sometimes their remote communities how to use the internet and computers. So if there was any skill that I would recommend or promote for my own self or anyone else, it would be learn just how to use a computer, digital literacy. And if there was the thread, the name digital literacy, Google that. That will be your doorway into more information. Yeah.
Yeah. That's wow. I would have never expected somebody to say that, but it's so obvious. It really is. And there's a lot of people who are not very competent with computers. And that's not a bash. It's just, I understand it. There's, what is it called? The fourth turning or something? I'm going to butcher it entirely, but I'll try. It's basically where after a certain amount of time between generations, and there's like, so essentially, the simplest way I can put it from my understanding is society gets to a point when you and your great grandparents are so disconnected, things just begin to fall apart on a, fundamental, like the the fabric of society begins to just do away because, you have like people like myself, I'm 25 years old, but then I speak with my grandma. I try to tell her about I try to explain to her what Bitcoin is in any capacity, and it's just not going to happen, right? So there just becomes this great disconnect. So it's great that you say that because I do believe, despite I guess sort of I wouldn't really call it an antagonist position I take, but just more of a just off of, I guess you can call it antagonistic. We'll just roll with it. I can't think of a better word at the moment. Towards this transhumanist movement is that, I think that older people are going to be able to really benefit from life extensions. I think that those therapies will be beneficial in some cases to older people, even as we both continue to age and live our life. I think that if you wanted to go that route, you could do so. So the only reason I'm bringing that up is just because I do think that the digital literacy is for older people. I think they're going to live longer than they used to because of technology, if they elect to do so. And so that digital literacy will be very crucial, because we're just going to have more people in the world. So yeah, that was a very interesting perspective.
Thank you. If it's not you with the digital literacy, hopefully it's a family member who can help you with the digital literacy. I know I've had to help my parents, and I'll just mention this as a personal note. Can I mention two things?
Go ahead.
My cousin has one of those, what do you call those? They're special. She's deaf, and she has this implant in her skull that helps her hear. And when she takes it off her head, she can't. And when she puts it back on her head, she can. So technology, that's medicine, in my opinion. And that's wonderfully valuable. And then I see my family, 4 generations of my family coming together on a weekly basis via Zoom just to talk to each other. And they couldn't do it otherwise. That's medicine. That's wonderful too, right? So that's what makes me smile. That's what makes me motivated to continue what I'm doing. That's beautiful, in my opinion. That's sacred, in my opinion. That's nice. Then there are the other sides of the transhumanist movement and the entire, you could call it the hubris, for sure. The hubris of technology and technologists could become very estranged to what I just described prior to that. So we have to be we have to be careful. And the anti-transhumanist movement, the untranshumanist, the anti-transhumanist, the whatever you want to label it, is so important when it comes to our outcome that I guess it's important to say keep going to the anti-transhumanist movement, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. Now, kind of an off-the-wall question, but it is related, and I think you'll appreciate it. Your thoughts on VR, and if you're familiar, the metaverse, because I think that actually that is going to be a huge tool for onboarding transhumanists.
Interesting. I could now VR, AR, augmented reality, and virtual reality. I've actually been doing some studying of that recently, some networking and some just listening to conversations in presentations. And the technology is evolving. The need for it and the desire for that technology is emerging. It's still not 100% what it could be, certainly not, but it will be eventually a mainstream thing, like you're kind of implying. And if I'm not mistaken about my understanding of the metaverse, it's the overlap of that perception onto the physical world, correct? So it's the ability to see like information and labels and data about the physical world with those lenses. Is that what you're referring to?
That's more so augmented reality. The metaverse would be you living in the virtual world. So, like participating actively in them. So think of like a Minecraft or a Fortnite. Those are examples of the metaverse at their most, I guess, fundamental stages. And as it progresses, you can think of something like, are you familiar with Ready Player One? Or have you read Snow Crash? That.
Excellent. All right. So the metaverse being like the fully immersive, you're in the zone, you're immersed, you're there, you're inside of another reality.
It's like a meta, like meta beyond universe. It's like a meta universe. So, yeah, the metaverse. Yeah.
Gotcha. That would be, some would describe that as sort of the next spiritual universe, the next manifestation.
That's how I've envisioned it as well. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's very I think it's increasingly common to view the metaverse as sort of the next spiritual frontier. And I know for a fact I can send you links to these if you'd like them. There are interviews and conversations on similar podcasts to yours that discuss the spiritual aspects of the metaverse from a VR artist's perspective, how they create the sacred in the metaverse with their art through virtual reality goggles and painting techniques. So I know that there's a lot of real conversation about this happening in the public. I I am intimidated by virtual reality because it's so impressive and it's just beginning. People fall over when they're on roller coasters in VR because they don't know how to stand up. They've lost that ability. It's so impressive. So I approach it very cautiously because I am still kind of ignorant about it, but I'm very I'm not even cautiously optimistic. I'm stunned, so I have to be careful. I don't jump in too quickly. I'm like, wow, I've never just almost overwhelmed, but knowing that I have a professional side, I can take my time and watch the technology evolve. As a user, I showed my parents augmented reality. They couldn't believe what they saw. And it was just a demo test of a simple advertising campaign. Just you put a picture down, inside the picture is a key. The lens of the tablet finds the key, and in this case, a dragon popped out of the image. They were just blown away. And that was like 5 years ago. Now in our modern world where the Oculus, I believe 2 has come out, the technology is getting more powerful. It is, in my opinion, like blockchain in its importance. There's definitely some visionaries that are getting involved with virtual reality and people who want to imagine this coming into reality, into our commonality, into our common space of physical meet space. Virtual reality is soon to come, as visions and goggles and headsets and maybe contact lenses, who knows, but very important stuff.
Yeah, it's all very fascinating, and I have been hesitant as well to dive into it on like as far as like buying a virtual reality headset, just because I know it's still so early. So I'm like, is this almost like buying a PlayStation 1 when, it's like, should I just wait for like like until it's like really, really good where you get a haptic suit, etc. And you can really, without, spending an arm and a leg for the technology, because that's another thing I think it's kind of pricey at the moment. But I am very optimistic about virtual reality, not just in the entertainment sector, but also in health, because there's evidence to suggest that it's already helped people overcome like PTSD, depression. It's there's this very interesting book. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called Presence, and I don't remember the author's name, however. But anyway, he's a journalist for some big publication, and in that book, he tells a story of this. I believe she's a psychologist, and how she was able to help people meditate using VR, and they actually were able to meditate in a way that they weren't able to without it. I'm not sure if anybody here you've meditated before. I know myself. I've meditated, and I can empathize with those people in that it can be hard sometimes to actually get into that meditative state, if you will. Although there really isn't like a particular state, you're supposed to just sit there and let your mind go. But if you've ever done it, you know what I'm talking about. There's a certain point you hit when you're really in the zone in your meditation where you're just there. But apparently, there's things like that with virtual reality that I think it's really cool. And I would like a link to the conversations that you were talking about. You can even say it on here. I don't care if you plug them. I'd like to throw support where I can, and it seems like they're talking about good stuff.
I don't remember the exact. I will definitely send you a link to answer your question, or your request, but I don't remember the name of the program off my top of my head. There is a book right up this alley called Spirit Tech. It's brand new. It's a legitimate. I say legitimate because it's a well done, intentionally well done book, researched book with interviews and all that kind of good jazz about technologies that are in the modern day being used for spiritual development. And it outlines, I believe, in part some virtual reality technologies, spirit tech. It's findable on Amazon. I bought it about a month ago, and it's a really interesting book to really crack open that ice in terms of your own individual understanding of what's possible. People are absolutely diving into this world, as some of them as quickly as they can, and others as reasonably and as professionally as they can. It just depends on who you are, what your motivation is, but it's real for sure. Real in the sense of it's percolating, I'll say.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Spirit Tech. That's interesting. I've read a really cool book as well, somewhere along those lines. It's a compilation of short stories. It's one of those kind of books. But the short stories are on the same universe, so it's just telling different people in that same like universe that it's building. It's called, I believe, Children of the New World. And one story in particular that I think ties in well with what you're saying. There was this younger guy, probably late teens, early 20s, traveling out, I believe, some Eastern countries. And there they had technology that could simulate a sense of enlightenment. And so you would take whatever this was, I can't remember the specifics. It's been like 3 years since I've actually read the book, but you would take whatever it was or do whatever it was, and you would have this sense of whatever enlightenment is. It's sort of one of those topics where nobody can ever really describe in a coherent way what it actually is, at least in my experience. Although I do believe that a sense of enlightenment is real. But yeah, so it's pretty fascinating that there's actually real world technologies that are working to do similar things to see if they can replicate uh, enlightenment, which I'm kind of dubious on. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Uh, the book that I recommended to you, Spirit Tech, is the first chapter deals exactly with that.
Okay.
The whole book deals with that, but the first chapter in particular deals with this, I believe, magnetic brain scanning or magnetic brain energy pulsing, and to try to replicate enlightenment through these plates they put over your head, and trying to precisely pinpoint in the brain where enlightenment happens supposedly, and then activate that with particular energy waves and see if meditation is more powerful that way. And according to the inventors of the technology and their volunteer subjects, it's quite powerful. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but if you pick up the book, or even if you read the first chapter on Amazon, like I think is available, you'll see that it's being done by scientists, which is, in my opinion, encouraging. They're not necessarily amateurs. They're not necessarily, although there's nothing wrong with being an amateur, mind you, or mind anyone. But
you got to start off with an amateur, regardless of where you're at. So yeah.
That's what it is. That's why it's not wrong to be an amateur. But this stuff is being taken up by PhDs and professional meditators, supposedly lifelong meditators. And the gentleman who is sort of the subject of the technology claims that he can't replicate these experiences without the tech, which is interesting. And the word I was looking for earlier about the technology is atrophy. If a human relies on a piece of technology, do they atrophy what they are relying on? Does it become weak in them and strong in the tech? So it's ultimately, do the meditators lose their ability to meditate without the tech? And that's sort of an interesting question.
It is. It's how dependent do you become on technology? I think that's a huge issue that we're facing today, which is why I think that there's a lot of mental health problems. Although I hesitate to say that we have a mental health crisis. I know that a lot of people say that. The reason I hesitate, though, is we don't know if there were mental health issues to the extent that there are today back in the early 1900s or 1800s, because from what we know, it wasn't as talked about. So there could have been, but it would just be more suppressed. One example I look at is like Sigmund Freud. I know he's very popular for, or well known for, I guess, popularizing the idea of sexual repression causing a lot of issues. And that's because he was seeing a certain part of society, I think it was mostly wealthy women, and that lifestyle was I guess, tough on them and a lot of what they had to go through. But anyway, that's why I kind of hesitate on whether or not we have a mental health crisis. But the dependency is really where I was going with this, is that, yeah, how dependent do you become? Because that atrophy, is you perfectly stated, it's not just on a physical level, but it can actually be on a conscious level, on an immaterial level that we don't even think about. For instance, you can say our memories kind of suffer from atrophy because I don't, I don't remember anybody's phone number except for my wife's. Like anybody else's phone number, I have my cell phone for that. It's like, why do I need to waste that space to remember, the number? So, but yeah, dependency is can be a good thing and a bad thing, I think, just like anything. Now, Bret, it's been awesome speaking with you. You have a lot of knowledge on this stuff, and also you have interesting perspectives. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to have the conversation with me, coming on the show. Um, where can people find you if they're interested in keeping up to date with what you're doing? I know you're not really on social media, but I know, as you were saying, you're on a couple forums where people can read your post and just, if they want to follow you and see what you're doing.
The one to find all that information in one place, go to wherebret.com. That do you mind if I spell it?
No, go ahead.
WHEREBRET.com. So it's not like werewolf Bret. It's where is Bret, wherebret.com.
Awesome.
Yep. That'll be updated for the rest of my professional life with all the links that I'll ever collect. So yes, wherebret.com.
Awesome. So I'll be sure to put the link in the description. That way people can easily find it. And once again, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. I had a great time. And this was a very interesting conversation. And I appreciated your challenging me and questioning me and making me review and self-reflect, which is of the essence for this kind of stuff.
Right. That's what I try to do with the show. It can be kind of hard, especially when you don't really know people. And also it's over the internet. So it's not even like, I don't know you personally, but I also can't really like sense you. Like I think you get what I mean. Like when you're actually speaking with somebody in person, body language, all this stuff that you can pick up on. But yeah, I try my best to politely, I guess find out, your thinking in its totality. But yeah, so once again, man, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course.